All right. Welcome, everybody. This is the January 22nd, 2024 meeting of the Southborough Historical Commission. I will call the meeting to order at 7:01 p.m., noting that in attendance are Vice Chair Annie Pfaff, Grant Farrington, Michelle Hokinson, Dan Blanchard, and myself, Kevin Miller. So the first thing we've got tonight is to sort of revisit an item we took up, I believe it was last time, right, Grant?
Uh,
December. Yeah,
yes, I believe it was December. Yep.
last meeting. With regard to the Jim Haggerty's, the town clerk's Community Preservation Act application for funding to preserve and restore permanent town records. This has to do with documents, I think all of which, and Jim's in the gallery, so he can correct me if I make any misstatements, but certainly the bulk of them stored presently in the basement of the townhouse, which is sort of damp and low ceilinged and problematic. And as you recall, our role in that sort of CPC process is fairly simple. Fortunately, we don't have to wade through the arcana of the Community Preservation Act. That's what the Community Preservation Committee's job is. Ours is simply to opine and take a vote on whether a project, in this case, whether the resources that would be preserved and restored are significant, as the rhetoric goes in the sort of approval flow chart, whether they're significant in the history, archaeology, architecture, or culture of Southborough. And that was what we took a vote on last time. And the reason it's come back to us, and I'm going to turn it over to Grant for just a quick explanation of this, but essentially, I think there was, and again, CPC is a very difficult job because the Community Preservation Act is complicated, I would say. Grant, is that fair?
I think that is fair.
Yeah, and so there was some question and a certain kind of doubling back that was necessary on what elements of the original proposal were actually eligible for CPA funding. And it turned out to be a little bit more limited than what the CPC chair had originally thought. So the application had to be essentially retooled a little bit in terms of the fundable parts of it from CPC sort of scaled down a bit. But it hasn't, what I can see, really fundamentally changed anything on our end. But Grant, do you want to just take it from there and say what needs to be said?
Yeah, I'll just be brief. Essentially, when it comes to the preservation of historic documents, the Community Preservation Act, and specifically the Department of Revenue's guidelines, says that you can only spend money that's actually going to be used on the physical preservation of the documents themselves. So I think that Jim's original request is around $80,000. And so now the current request that I think will be likely to be advanced to the town meeting floor is for $47,000. And that's strictly for only the funds that will be pertaining to the actual preservation of the documents. And I believe, maybe Jim could speak to this, but the other portion of the money he's going to be seeking through his own budget, so the town clerk's budget. So the part that was not CPA fundable, he'll be seeking other means to get that funded. And so the reason that I think the CPC wanted this to come before us tonight for another vote is that Jim provided a complete list of all the documents and the type of documents that will be being preserved. So the CPC needs us to vote on the actual list of documents that that are proposed to be preserved. So I think that's the main reason for it being on the agenda tonight.
Right, and I will bring, I'm going to screen share for a second so I can bring up because Jim had very helpfully sent along this list, and it differs just ever so slightly from the list that I had sent you earlier that Grant had forwarded along. And so this is it. And as you can see, it's, I love the title of this one, Boundaries and Perambulations with Adjacent Towns, which sounds so lovely and poetic. 1757 to 1856. Going further down, the Pilgrim Evangelical Society records from the 1830s, Reverend Nathan Stone papers, 1733 to 1788, all the way down to highway and wood tax lists from 1773. This is a really wonderful kind of collection. And like I said, some of them have these wonderful titles. I really like Perambulations, Boundaries and Perambulations with Adjacent Towns. So that's the list. And let me go back. And the other thing I would show, as long as I'm at this, is what in the application, I sent this out to you folks, and you saw the original application, the last time we were looking at this. So yeah, I hope I've got this right. Yeah, this is dated January 12th, that the total CPA fund request is $47,046. Correct, Grant? I believe that would be it.
That is my understanding. I believe that's the most recent one I have. Yep.
And so just to scroll you down to the flow chart on this is that in terms of qualifying historic projects for CPA funding, is the project appropriating CPA funds for building, structure, vessel, real property, document, which is what we're dealing with in this case, or artifact? Yes. Is the resource in the State Register of Historic Places? No, these are documents. So you're going over to here. Has the Historical Commission made a determination that the resource is significant in the history, archaeology, architecture, or culture of your city or town? That's the thing that we're here to vote on. If we vote yes, then the question is, is it for, in this case, it would be preservation of a historic resource, and I guess rehabilitation or restoration, because there's going to be document. I don't want to misuse the word, but there's some of these documents that are have some significant damage in terms of water, mold, and they actually need to be remediated. So if we get a yes here, this is going to be a clear yes, and then it gives the green light that it is CPA eligible, and then of course it goes to town meeting. And so let me stop this share. Oh, sorry. Does that make sense to everybody? So I don't know, Jim, if there's anything if you want to come over and there's anything you want to add to Mr. Haggerty's in the attendees. Okay, he's got his hand up. I'm going to promote you, Jim, to panelist. Go ahead, Jim. You're with us.
Hi, thanks for letting me come forward here tonight. I just want to take, first of all, thank you for letting me do this. I want to explain a couple of things here because this is going to get confusing at town meeting when we talk about preservation of documents and scanning. There are a lot of balls in the air in different arts of scanning. The biggest difference in the list of documents that you have now versus the one you had before is the Community Preservation Committee asked me to combine all documents that will be physically preserved on one document. So when you go to that document with the boundaries and perambulations, the bottom 4 items are items that are being sent out because of the significant damage to them, being sent out to the New England Document Conservation Center. So the list that you have is everything, the ones that will be preserved in-house using up to 6 hours a week of archivist time, and the ones that will be sent outside. So this constitutes the totality. The difference why we're sending some out versus in is the ones that are going out need an awful lot of care that we don't have the facilities or the ability to identify. Right. So in terms of overall funding, the big difference in reduction from the early application you saw on this is they determined that we can't use any time for the archivist to do scanning of documents that are historical in nature. And it gets down to, because they're in a condition that they do not need to be physically restored, we can't use CPC money for anything related to them whatsoever. Okay, so I will have some money in my clerk's budget to pay for up to 13 hours of time, or 13 and a half hours of time of that archivist in my budget this year. So that's what they related to. So,
And I saw that you were also sending out quite a large tranche of stuff to Digital Commonwealth.
yes, that's the fourth section.
Right.
That's at no cost to us. We've now sent out, I believe, either 55 or 60,000 pages in the first group, and we have more going out as well. So we're in very good shape for that. So,
and I would like to think that would really help you. I was glad to see that personally, because I think someone that wants to take the time, and hopefully you'll have an opportunity to explain that very clearly at town meeting, that anybody that's looking at this, I think that for me, the takeaway is that you're really using a kind of great deal of creativity and good resource management to get this project done, within your own budget, CPA, where you can avail yourself of the free services of the Digital Commonwealth, that you're, kind of pulling from different sources of help to get it done at really, I think, a very modest cost to the town in relation to the value of this material.
Well, there is one more thing that we are going to have to pay for, and it's questionable right now whether it's going to be a standalone capital article, or whether they're going to bring that back in my budget. But right now, there's a penciled in article for $53,000 of ARPA money I've requested to conserve, to scan documents because of the size and condition, the things we can't do in-house. You need certain kind of scanners that look like a scale, basically a digital scale, to make that work, and that needs to go outside. It's a toss-up right now whether that'll come out of the leftover ARPA money that's kind of being done, or whether that'll go in the budget. So that's up in the winds. So you're right, Kevin. At the end of the day, at town meeting, I'm going to have to talk to this. And in addition to all of this, we have we use seniors on a tax write-off to scan other documents inside, not historical documents, but closed records that are filed with the clerk from the Conservation Planning and ZBA board. Just seen the basement, it's a disaster. But because we've been able to scan all those into archivable PDFs so that we can search them, we'll be doing 1/3 check of that. But it looks like in August of this year, we'll be able to throw out roughly 38 bankers' boxes of records that we've been able to digitize over the past 5 or 6 years. So we've got a lot of moving parts to make all this work. And one other component of this, that archivist has got to work part-time for us. It's not just to preserve the first 80% of these documents here, but he's also transitioning all of these records that are scanned up to the website 01772history.org, which isn't just, hey, here are 100,000 images of stuff, but it tells a story as to how they all interrelate, it's a nice project. And our objective is to have that done before the tricentennial. We should run on target for that.
Right. And the application that Grant sent over to me, and then I forwarded to the full commission, also had a couple of the letters from the New England Document. What is it? New England Document Conservation Center.
Yes.
Acronym, right? And those are very interesting reads, because they really go into some considerable detail about the condition issues that you're facing with some of those documents, and why, for instance, outside remediation is going to be so critical to save them. So I thought that was a very good, from my perspective at least, a very good trail of support as to that you've really looked at all the issues involved, and then tried to not only put a tourniquet on the most serious ones, but then to move forward on the long term with a pretty balanced plan, I thought, of how to accomplish this. So I'm now, Grant or Jim, remind me, the last time we voted this, right? You have to remind me, it was we took 2 separate votes.
Yes.
right?
Yeah, the first vote was on the documents themselves, whether or not we deem them to be of historic value, whatever was written in that
Right.
that PDF
And I
that you
have that
have.
rhetoric, right?
And then the second one was just a general, so that one's required. And then this, well, the CPC requires both. The second one is just a general vote of whether the Historical Commission supports the application.
Right. So again, the first one is essentially, does it meet the definition in that flow chart? And secondly, do we support the project overall? But so before we
Yeah.
get to that, I want to, if Michelle or Dan or Annie, you have any questions or comments about this process? I know it feels a little bit like Groundhog Day, but it's really important for us to sort of clarify this. And I know, we obviously were in support last time, but if any of your feelings have changed or you had questions.
I'll just add that I missed our first discussion. I wasn't able to make that meeting. So I've appreciated, Jim, the opportunity to hear from you about the project. And thanks to Grant and the CPC for your work to make sure we get this just right to move forward.
Michelle, anything on your end?
I have nothing to add.
Okay. Dan?
No, I mean, I think any effort to preserve historic documents is a noble effort.
Here to that. So, all right, then I would entertain a motion, if that's it, and as to that would state that the resources in question that have been presented to us by Mr. Haggerty in that list that accompanies the clerk's application are significant to the history of Southborough. I think that's all that's required.
So
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
All right, so moved by Annie, seconded by Grant. I'm gonna go roll call vote. Annie,
yes.
Grant,
Yes.
Michelle,
Yes.
Dan,
Yes,
and Miller is aye. So 5-0 on that the resources are significant to the history of Southborough. And then the second question is whether we as a commission support overall this project. I will make that motion. Is there a second?
I
Second. Go ahead,
Annie,
Michelle.
I think I heard Annie on that first. Okay, so moved by the chair, seconded by vice chair. Roll call vote, Annie,
Yes.
Grant,
Yeah, I'll just say, last time we voted, I had abstained because I hadn't reviewed the application with CPC yet, but now that I've reviewed it, I am in favor. Yes.
great. Michelle,
Yes.
Dan,
yes,
Miller's aye. So 5-0 on that as well. We enthusiastically, I think it's fair to say, support this application. Hope it goes through at town meeting and would be happy to speak up in support of it at that time, certainly. So anything else, Jim?
No, just as a follow-on to this, I'm working with the treasurer's office and the assessor's office. I've had two vendors come in to start the process to determine what it would cost to preserve some of their records, which also go back to the 1700s that are in tough shape. So I notified the CPC at the last time I was at the meeting that they can anticipate an application to them next year. So we'll continue the process.
Interesting. Maybe I do have one last question before then we let you go, is that I know there's no clear answer to this, but I am interested in the ultimate disposition of these documents, that, in other words, where they're actually going to physically reside going forward, because ultimately, no matter how skillfully they're preserved or restored, the basement of the townhouse is problematic, at least as it currently exists. I don't know if there's going to be an effort to excavate it and somehow bring it into the 21st century anytime soon, or if they'll end up at Flag or but as I said to you, Jim and I were able to chat briefly the other day, and I said that I would love to see a scenario somewhere down the line where actually, without inconveniencing the clerk's office, that researchers or interested parties or regular citizens could come and under supervision review these documents, that we're going to spend a lot of money to preserve and in many cases digitize, but that you would actually be able to basically show our treasures, and that researchers could come look at them. I don't know if anything you can probably can't say much about that because nobody knows at this point.
No, I've started to let it be known that, well, I think there's a very good chance that that CPC would fund the preservation of those records to an outside vendor. It doesn't have any of the consequences of the issues we have in here right here. But when you look at what's been spent prior to my time in the clerk's office and what we've done here and all the rest of it, at the end of the day, we will have spent somewhere on the order of $500,000 worth of monies on these projects collectively, somewhere in that range. It's a big number. And it would be a crime to just put them back in a place where they're going to develop mold and just deteriorate. That's just crazy. And when you look at our perspective, the tiny storage that we don't have, and we store the ballots and all the other good stuff, and the crazy world we live in with, people thinking that we're all running down to Georgia and rigging their elections and then coming back up here and doing it. We don't have an opportunity to store our stuff in the most secure location. We just don't. We store our ballots in boxes in the basement that are sealed, but they're in areas where any maintenance guy can walk in unescorted. And that's a bad idea for 1,000 reasons. What makes sense to me is once the new Historical Society building and Art Center is done, it makes sense to convert the basement of the old Flag School to a properly environmentally secure storage area for these things with a place for people to be able to go in and walk into it. It also makes a ton of sense for us because it has a walkout basement in the back. So we can deliver our ballots in there and deliver our election equipment instead of storing them all the different places we store them. And put the clerk's office up in the back up top and have a front open space for people to vote in person and use that for town board meetings at night when they want to meet. It makes a ton of sense. That's not an easy fix. I know there's some moisture issues in the basement, but I think that makes a lot of sense for the town to do. But regardless, I'm not going to put any of this stuff back down the basement, whether I have to put it at Iron Mountain or someplace else or rent space. I'm just not going to do it. And I think that the voters would support that. So, but hey, I'm calling from my house on Maple Crest Drive, way paid taxes just like you guys, and I don't want to waste a dime on that either. So it's just, I hope we'll get to a point where we can collectively do something that makes a lot of sense. So we have a lot of money invested in this. Let's do it right. And this is a lot of really cool things. One thing I haven't found, which I would love to be able to find, is the tithing person's rod. It's the first elected appointed position in Southport, the first town meeting. And it's a rod that has a brass end on one end and a feather on the other. I don't know that any of these still exist. And that person's job was to go around and hit men on the head when they would fall asleep in church and tickle women and children. And I think that would be the coolest thing if we could find that.
That could occasionally be useful in a historical commission meeting, I'm sure.
Yes.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of really cool stuff that's that we've uncovered, and it's a nice thing to be able to do it. And independent of the money you see here, I added a couple of $1,000s in my budget to be able to take some of these really cool documents and print them up oversized and do other things to be able to share these with the elementary school and high school kids. So, and by the way, if you come in person for the presidential primary election, we're going to have roughly 20 8th grade students who will be working and observing the election, just helping learn about elections in general. Kind of a nice thing.
Good. Well, thank you so much, Jim. And hope that, good luck with the CPC process, and we'll be watching, and we're certainly in support.
Thank you all for your help. Have a good night.
Right. Have a good
Thank
night.
you.
Good night.
Okay, let's see, we're gonna move on to, what do we got? Next is the final review of the list of the Revolutionary War veterans' graves in the old burial ground. And Sally is with us, and I'm going to promote her right now to panelist. And I have to say that Sally, of course, has done tremendous work over a long period of months at this point, and we ought to be, I know I am, absolutely eternally grateful for everything she's done and for her expertise and her brilliance in sussing out a pretty thorny thicket of issues. And also our one and only Dan Blanchard for work, because, you know, as you recall, where we're at here is, you know, there was this long list of, I mean, I roll this way back, is right, the impulse here has a long history, but it basically involves the effort to recognize as best we can Revolutionary War veterans' graves in the old burial ground, a task that is immensely complicated by gaps in record keeping, the kind of losses that Jim is trying to prevent for the future, where records were lost, poorly kept, lost in floods, simply mislaid. And then we have a kind of a big challenge in the OBG with the fact that largely, there were other factors, but largely due to the hurricane of 1938, that we lost so many headstones, that we find ourselves in a situation where of this final list that Sally's compiled and that Dan has helped her make final refinements on, it comes to 80 graves, only 37 of which are marked and 43 are unmarked, which is really quite shocking, and it kind of lends urgency to this movement to, you know, sort of recognize them. And as you recall, you know, there's a lot of discussion with this that sort of grew out of some of the, unfortunately, more controversial stuff about the flags in the OBG. Then I'd been contacted by Joe Gautier at the Massachusetts Sons of the American Revolution, and, you know, offering this program where they would erect a bronze marker that they've done in many towns around the state at this point, to list and commemorate, you know, the Revolutionary War veterans in the OBG. Is something I leaped on immediately, took to the select board, got their blessing. And so then it's a matter of us coming up with the most accurate and comprehensive lists that we possibly can, because this is going to be cast in bronze and we don't want to do it twice. And so to get it right and make sure we have, you know, good list of names, we can honor the veterans as they deserve to be honored and be completely respectful about it, and make sure that to the best of our ability, we don't make mistakes. So, you know, Sally came, I think it was in October, November, with a preliminary list and questions. And, you know, we tried to go through it in open meeting, and it was just in a way, too much to deal with all at once and in a large group. So as you recall, the thinking was to kind of put together a smaller sort of review team. And actually it was Jim Haggerty who said to me, well, you can't put a group on that, because even though it's below a quorum, it still has sort of open meeting issues involved. You need to designate one person. And we chose Dan to do that, of course. And I think it was an excellent choice, given, you know, Sally's got the best possible background to do this work you could ask for. And I thought that Dan, similarly, as a peer reviewer, you know, has got the perfect background to do this. So we set Dan and Sally off, and they've spent, I don't know, it's been about a month or so, refining this and going over with it. And as I understand it, and I want to ask you both to talk, but that at this point they're satisfied, that they got it. And I'm telling you, if Sally and Dan are satisfied, I'm satisfied. That this is the right list, and I can bring it up for you very quickly if you'd allow me to do that just first. This is just going to take 1 second. There, are you guys seeing that?
Yes.
So in the marked graves category, we've got everybody from Jonas Ball at the top down to Joseph Witherby at the bottom. And then there's this list you can see of unmarked graves. That's on the right, starting at the bottom left and continuing on the right side. And as I said, it's somewhat of the urgency of doing this signage in the OBG is really brought home when you look at this list and see that there are 37 people that have gravestones right now or markers in the OBG, and 37 that have them and 43 that do not. So I couldn't believe more strongly in this project. And I will say that it was, if I'm not mistaken, Sally and Dan, the one lingering question you had was about Elijah Newton. Am I correct? And he is in a marked grave, in fact. But Sally, can you speak to how you and Dan sort of reviewed this and worked and got to the point that you feel good about it?
Yeah. Well, there were 6 or 7 that I had some questions on, and when Dan and I met and went over them, and we find it's very easy to go down rabbit holes when we're doing this kind of research, because you veer off on different things. But we were, going over the things that we had found. We were pretty comfortable with everybody except old Elijah Newton. And we decided we'd do a little bit more. And the more I did, the more I did not feel he should be eliminated. There is an Elijah Newton who served on guard duty in Rutland, Mass. After the Battle of Saratoga. There was a prisoner of war camp in Rutland, Mass. And we have at least one other of our soldiers who served at guard duty there. And as I do other research on others of these veterans, I just find an awful lot of ties between Southborough and Rutland and Spencer and that area. And so I just became much more comfortable with thinking that we had the right guy. And as I think I said before, I would rather err on the side of caution in any case than to leave somebody off who should be there. But I think he is the right Elijah Newton. There was an Elijah Newton that got married in Rutland in 1780. And our Elijah Newton does not get married until he is 62 years old here in Southborough. So I do think he probably had gotten married previous to that. Now, again, you mentioned missing records and things. Can't find what happened to the first wife or that Elijah, that Elijah Newton 100% for sure. But anyway, he got married when he was 62, died about 8 years later. His widow got married 3 more times. As I said, going down rabbit holes, you want to find out what happened to them. Yeah, and anyway, I'm pretty sure he belongs there, and I'm quite sure that the others that we had questions about do not belong there. I don't know if Dan, if you want to add to that.
No, Sally was incredibly patient with me. We worked for about, really just that initial meeting was about 2 hours. Just kind of looking at the process that she used, which is very impressive, and just the number of resources that are there, and that there are still so many gaps to it. But yeah, I mean, I think Elijah was the one that we walked away with. I was not able to find, I mean, my information that I found was essentially duplicate to Sally's, relying pretty heavily on what I could find through Ancestry and Soldiers and Sailors. But you know, it is as with a lot of agricultural communities, there's a lot of there's a lot of movement in between communities. And I think that's kind of where we are with Elijah. So my rabbit hole was actually looking at town fines and what was the fine that he actually paid, and why did he have to pay a fine? But that's a whole different kettle of fish.
Yeah, I have to say that, and I mean, I know that, Sally just has really done fantastic work. And I feel really good, as I said, that, that Dan could sit down with Sally, review it, make sure that even the best of us, I mean, the English teacher by trade makes typos all the time, like you just miss stuff. And so, that Dan was able to sit down and come away and saying, wow, this was done really well. And I concur, gives me a lot of confidence. So what I think, if the rest of you are satisfied and happy, that I think our next step is to vote to approve this list, because I would like to be able to move forward. And before we get to that, let me explain to you, because I don't think I have previously. There's a little bit of a fly in the ointment here, and it actually is something that is to the credit of Southborough and the historical record of Southborough's service in the Revolutionary War. As I said, Massar has been putting up they started this project, and they started putting up these plaques, right, in various places. As you know, there's one in Marlborough. That's the one I photographed and had shown at a select board meeting. And, that has about 27 names on it. That's in that central burial ground right on Main Street in next to what's now their town library, the old senior high school. But only 27 names on it. Some of Joe Gautier sent me photographs of some of the other plaques he's put up around the state at this point. And, there's one in Scituate. It has 18 names. There's one in Wellesley in a burial ground, a church burial ground, that has 16 names. I believe the biggest one that they've erected thus far is in Weymouth and has 40 names. Ours has 80. We'll have 80. And as I understand, and Sally, could you jump in and correct me when I'm wrong here, but essentially what this has to do with is the fact that all the revolutionary interments in Southborough are entirely centralized. They're not spread among other churchyards or in various places around town. And plus, that Southborough, it turns out, has a pretty exemplary record of service to the new nation, in the Revolutionary War. So that we have 80 names to put forward. I mean, again, with great urgency, because 43 of them don't have any marker otherwise. It is, again, it's a great credit to Southborough, but it's an issue, because when I saw this coming down the line, and I saw that we were going to have 80 names on the plaque, those bronze plaques, and there's something later in our meeting that goes to this issue, they cost by the letter. They're expensive. Annie's nodding. She knows this. And so I called Joe up and I said, I'm just trying to brace him up for this. I said, Joe, I think we're going to have, and I explained the urgency of this. We really, with these 43 unmarked graves, we got to do something about this. But I said, we're looking at about 80 names, and he took a big intake of breath, and he was like, "Oh, that's really expensive, don't you?" And I said, "Yeah." It's kind of, what am I going to tell you, pal? I mean, I'm kidding, but what am I going to say? Because it is what it is. And he said, "Well, the whole deal was, and when I pitched this to select board, I mean, we never got to this granular of a level of it, that they're going to pay for the whole thing." And he's like, "I don't think I can pay for all that." And he had previously sort of said that, he was kind of had a free hand budget wise, but this program has sort of taken off, and he's getting a lot of interest. And now, when he can basically, for the price of our plaque, get plaques in 3 towns, it's not, in other words, an 80 name plaque doesn't double the price of a 40 name plaque, but it's pretty close. Like, it increases it fairly substantially. Anyway, he was giving me this, like, well, you might have to pay for part of it or half of it. You might have to fundraise. You might, so, obviously that was a little bit deflating. And I just deferred further conversation about that with him until I said, "Look, I said, our crack researcher is at it and wants to get everything perfect. As soon as we have it perfect and voted for, and I have the actual number, I'll come back to you and let's figure it out." So once we get this figured out and voted for, I'm going to go back to Joe sort of on bended knee and make the pitch that the reason we're going to cost so much money for you is because we're a real point of pride for the Massachusetts Sons of the American Revolution, having put forward 80 people. So you know what I mean? It's that the great honor of Southborough is also going to be an expensive proposition, but I am committed, I will tell you, by hook or crook, to get this money and to get this plaque up. And even if, I fingers crossed, we don't have to go this alone. We need to do it. But that's why I was pushing Dan and Sally to, come to a final conclusion, for instance, on Elijah Newton, because I want to move forward with Joe before. The more time that goes by, the more communities are getting in line for these signs, and the less likely he is to pay for the whole thing. So anyway, Annie, go ahead.
Oh yeah, I just had and you might have mentioned this. Do you know the full cost of the sign? Have you talked about any of those figures with him?
No, but just going from, what obviously we paid for the National Register signs,
Yeah.
large bronze signs. I know what they cost, and I will tell you that I actually did a kind of miraculous estimate on that rural cemetery water
Right.
tower sign, which I spec'd at 10 by 14. So I have a pretty good sense. We're talking thousands of dollars. And
No.
one of
Okay.
the questions is actually, how do you get 80 names on it without making it so big and unwieldy? And some of the,
Right.
as you know, I believe Franklin Bronze can do it. They did our National Register signs. These can be manufactured with names on both sides.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a pricey,
Of
so
course, that's just an additional cost.
right.
For
So it might be like if you had a sign like that was double-sided mounted on a pole instead of back mounted, you might have the marked graves on one side and the unmarked graves on the other. Or I don't know, maybe you fully alphabetize and just have little markers next to the ones that are unmarked. That scheme would need to be worked out later. But I think so. What I want to do now, if you guys are amenable, and if you're satisfied with Sally and Dan's work, is to vote through this list of 80 names, and then let me take the next step with Joe and see just how far I can prevail upon the good folks at MassArt to go with this. And if there's a shortfall, I did mention this possibility, the select board chair, just so it was on his radar, because they, again, we were given the imprimatur to do this. from the select board. So I want to keep him abreast, and it's all in flux right now, but go ahead, Michelle.
So my question, is the following. Is there a timeline on there? I mean, do we need to get this in sooner rather than later, meaning before all the other towns, draw the funds and there's no monies left? What is the timeline on this?
The sooner we can get this done, the more likely, and if we could have gotten it done in the fall, you know what I mean? I think that every day goes by. That's why I'm feeling a certain urgency. The odds of us getting all the money from Massar diminish. But we had to do what we did. And again, I know that I know how hard Sally worked on this, and she did it as quickly as she could. So on balance, I think we're in great shape. Would somebody make a motion to approve the list of names as, oh, go ahead, Grant.
Sorry, just a tiny thing. I think on the list of Markgraves, if we prove it, Joseph Onthank should be capitalized. It's very minor.
Yes, thank you for catching that. I was actually going to mention that. I thought that was just a small. Is that correct, Sally? Are you seeing that?
Okay, sorry. If it's going to be the official list,
yeah, I'll make that correction. No, that's very sharp-eyed.
That's just a typo.
Yeah, no, it's fine.
Yeah, I saw the same thing.
Just while I'm speaking, I did just want to say that I am a little bit concerned about the size of the sign when we get to that. It could just be my imagination, but 80 names seems like a very large, kind of overwhelming sign. So trying to preserve the sign in relation to the old burial ground in a tasteful way, I think is important. Right. So maybe a double-sided would be best, but we can get to that.
Yeah. And they can adjust fonts and stuff, but yeah, I want the names to be legible. I immediately thought, especially since it's a fairly even balance, 37 marked, 43 unmarked, that if you did a double-sided sign, you could still keep the scale so that it wasn't like a billboard, but also legible. So that's what I'm going to pitch to Joe. But they're going to have to be creative about it. And he is periodically, when he sent me a lot of the photos of the signs as they appear in other towns. And they have to scale them differently, depending on, the Scituate sign or the Wellesley sign, let's say with 16, is roughly, I believe it might be the exact same dimensions as the Weymouth sign that has 40 names. But I do agree that 80 is going to be a real challenge. I think that's what took the air out of, sort of sucked the oxygen out of his lungs when I told him the number. But again, it's because our burials are centralized here in the South, where we're somewhat of I can't believe we're utterly unique in that regard, but certainly a little bit different than many of the towns he's previously dealt with. So with the amendment that Grant has specified about the capitalization of that one name, what was the name again? Joseph
Onthank.
Yeah, Joseph Onthank, with that correction made as amended. Is there a motion to approve this list of names of veterans, Revolutionary War veterans in the old burial ground?
So moved.
Thank you. Second.
Second.
Okay, so motion made by Grant, seconded by Annie. I'll go roll call vote. Annie?
Yes.
Grant?
Aye.
Michelle?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
And Miller is aye. So 5-0. Thank you. And I will say there's one last thing about this is that Sally, in her diligence during the fall, I had indicated when I pitched this idea to the select board that I was very interested in the input or at least a look over by the Veterans Grave agent, who at the time was Mr. Wynot. He ended up resigning his position during the fall, and therefore was not in the mix or not didn't respond to Sally's request for input, and I tried to contact him as well several times. That said, I would still like to reach out to someone in the VSOs in town. And by the way, the town has not appointed a replacement veterans graves agent. I don't think anyone has come forward for that position at this point. So we're kind of, in that respect, we're on our own. But I would like to reach out to Mr. Kalenda, which some of you are familiar with, who represents one of the VSOs in town. And because as I understand it, I think he was the person that Joe Gautier at Massar had been contacted by a member of the community here, and he couldn't remember who it was. But I think through conversations with various people that it was actually Mr. Kalenda that had reached out to Joe in the first place. I think Sally's nodding, so you may have some knowledge of this. Go ahead, Sally.
I just know he's a member of SAR, so.
Yeah, right. So I think that's pretty logical. So I again, with your sufferance, and the approval of the group, I'd like to reach out to Mr. Kalenda and explain to him the diligence that we've done, and that, because I'd like to have their sort of blessing on this, that they feel good about it, and that I'm sure Sally would no trouble like sharing the research or talking just to explain the methodology that you went through. Is that fair to say? Good. So I will proceed with that. I will proceed with contacted to Joe Gautier and see how we can sort of move this forward. The answer Michelle's earlier question, I think obviously the goal is to do this as quickly as we can, and I had again sort of pitched it partly to the select board as a way to not only to do right by the veterans, which is the main thing, but also Joe had indicated to me that when Massar places one of these plaques, they show up in the chapter that's active, that covers this area, is apparently very active in terms of reenactors, that they will come in period costume and fire off the muskets and do a very nice sort of ceremony, which I thought would really go some ways toward stimulating interest in the tricentennial. Because I see all this sort of working hand in glove. So we'll see how long it takes. Production of these signs tends to take several months. So it would be a while. I had, when this started back in September, I had, I guess, sort of dim hopes that we might have it up around Patriots Day 2024, but that's not going to happen. But, perhaps 4th of July, who knows? Stay tuned. I will keep you guys posted on this. Thank you, Sally, so much. I can't tell you how grateful I am. And, again, Sally, started this work with the idea for us through the tax program to update the pamphlet on Revolutionary War veterans, and she was nice enough to allow me to redirect her to this project. And now, hopefully, Sally, you can sort of turn back to the original for whatever hours you left, and we're going to want you again, that's for sure, to continue on the pamphlet, because I think what would be nice is to get that complete so that when this plaque goes up, oh, wouldn't it be great if we could hand out copies of the revised, so that people would have a sort of narrative guide to who all these people on this plaque were. I know that's an ambitious goal. No pressure, Sally, but that's what I'd like to get going. You're on mute if you want to say anything.
I was going to say, let's get the plaque done really quickly, but the pamphlet might be done for the tricentennial.
All right, fair enough. I mean,
I'm stuck in the bellows. There are an awful lot of them.
No, I know it's a big job, but I think it's really important and very helpful, and I'm very grateful to you and Dan both. So, all right, Sally, we're going to let you go, and we'll move on.
Sally.
Thank you. All right. Moving on. This is an important one, and we made some progress on the issue of the historic house signs program and the signing of about the whole thing about taking donations, which we're allowed to do. And Annie has had conversations with, was it Brian Ballantyne?
Yeah, the finance office, mostly Carla.
Okay. And so can you just explain to us, first of all, what you need?
Yes. So, and Kevin, we have not already voted on the donation account, have we? I feel like we might have done that piece, but not the other one.
Minute-taking Grant, tell us. I don't believe
the
we
minutes.
did.
I will go look at the minutes now. if you'd
Okay.
like me to.
So let's start with the other piece of that then. So so how the financial process works in with the town is that when the commission gets an invoice, technically all members of the commission are supposed to sign off on like the payable cover sheet that we that we authorize the expenditure. So obviously logistically that is difficult. So they do have a process to allow the treasurer and a backup or two to sign invoices in the absence of, every single signatory from the commission. There is a formal process to designate those signatories. Essentially, we just have to take a vote tonight and provide the minutes from our meeting tonight to to the townhouse. And then there's also a form that everyone on the commission does need to sign just once, saying that yes, we did authorize me and I would say Kevin as the chair to sign off on invoices, just so they have that on record. Now, what I would plan to do is before signing anything as the treasurer, I would come to the commission and let you know what the expenditure is. So I would say, Kevin, I would say as a monthly agenda item, we could have a treasurer's report where I can go over any invoices that need to be processed or things of that nature before signing off on them, or sometimes if we've been spending money, an update on how much money is left, stuff like that. So really there's just one time where we are going to need all of your signatures, and that's just at the beginning to say, yes, we do authorize Annie and Kevin to sign off on payables and payroll, which we don't have, but if we did, we would be allowed. And this is an annual thing. So it does need to be updated every year, or as we have new commissioners on our commission, they would need to, sign that as well. But it just should help facilitate the invoice process. So not everyone has to sign off on it every single time we have something come in. And until we brought our historic house sign program back, we really have not spent money in, I think, several years. So this is kind of a new process for all of us, and kind of learning as we go. And just a quick update, we have had some recent invoices from our house programs, but they have gone through the ARPA funds, which Mark Purple signs off on those. So when we are using ARPA funds, there's yet another separate financial process that we have to go through. So this would really be only for our own historical commission budget monies.
So on that, Annie, actually, I was down at the townhouse the other day, and in our mailbox, I picked up the checks that they've cut
Oh,
for
I was looking for those.
for that batch. I picked it up on Friday.
Wait,
Um,
we have a mailbox at the
yeah,
townhouse?
we do. And these just showed up.
Oh,
These were just there on Friday. So
on
when
Friday,
I
okay.
got there. But these are the tranche of signs that we just
Yeah,
took.
Okay,
But then you're saying this was dispersed out of our
the ARPA
ARPA.
funds,
Okay,
yes,
good. The $1,000 that we were granted.
yes,
Good.
exactly.
Well,
So
that's ideal.
So I went to the townhouse 2 Fridays ago to pick those up, not knowing we had a mailbox there. But David at the front desk of the treasure collectors area said he thought they were mailed. So I picked up the checks I picked up the signs from the vendor and said, "Oh, I think your checks are in the mail." So I didn't realize they hadn't been received or paid yet. So I will pick those up or from you, I guess,
Yeah.
at some point when I'm back from Florida and deliver those to the vendor.
Good. Yeah, these are dated the 12th. So they're,
Yeah.
they're fresh.
Yeah. Okay.
But I didn't want to let it sit there. So
Yes. Yeah. No, definitely. I need to get those to Signorama.
good. So they'll be happy. I'm happy that that's coming out of our ARPA, the $1,000 that select board granted us to
Yes.
feed the sign program. So that
Yeah.
because the ultimate goal of this, as you remember, we discussed this last time, is to this is the other vote we have to take, to allow for donations and allow a donation account. And Annie, correct me if I'm misspeaking, but this money would, and it's a cumbersome process that it has to go before the select board has to accept it in open meetings.
Rand has his hand up. Were you able to look at the minutes if
Yes.
I feel like we've already done this part.
Yeah, so again, I'm not super aware of all the intricacies, so I'll just read. It's only 2 sentences, so I'm just going to read what we voted on. So this was two sentences and then the vote. Ms. Pfaff noted that the HC had authority to accept donations, but they need to vote to create a donation account, which is a separate account from the HC's operating budget that would be under the control of the HC, Historical Commission.
Yeah.
Motion by Ms. Pfaff to create a Historical Commission donation account within the Historical Commission's budget. Seconded and approved 5-0. So
Okay,
is that
good.
what you're referring to?
Right, it is. Yeah, so that's what we'll be
Okay.
set for. And the like I said, it's a little bit cumbersome is because Annie, you explained that, how when the donations come in, it takes up time at a select board meeting, which is got to be maddening to them that they have to vote to accept $50 or $75. And you remember the point of this was that the signs will be provided free. They cost us about $75, but we wanted to have provision, as we are entitled by statute, to accept donations in any amount from people that wanted to help us perpetuate the program, or recipients of the signs, as with the Muddalix that we sort of re-inaugurated the program with, who said, well, I'd really like to make a donation. And I said, at the moment, we didn't have a mechanism for doing it. So that if we can accept donations from people who get a sign and say, wow, I'd like to either pay the full amount or $20 or $10 or $50 or whatever it is, that will help us. And as Annie explained, the treasurer's office people have this set up. So as I understand it, correct me if I'm wrong, Annie, that once a donation comes in, is accepted by the select board, it will flow to our account.
It's our donation account, yes.
Right. And that does not, right now, like we only have $1,000 budget, but if we don't spend it all at the end of the fiscal year, it goes back. We forfeit it. We don't get to carry it over. This donation account would carry over.
That's
So-
my understanding, correct.
Right. Does that make sense to everybody?
Yes.
So we
We did
voted.
create it at the previous meeting. I just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah,
Thank you.
so I
Yeah.
think in terms of like the vote we need to take tonight is more about just the standard invoice signatories. And then all of us, all the commissioners do need to stop by the townhouse at some point to sign the form that I'm away, so I won't be able to get it to there until probably like next week sometime. But that just we need to take the vote and stop by the townhouse to to do those signatories to allow Kevin and me to sign off on invoices that do come in. So the main reason why those invoices, Kevin, were paid out of the ARPA funds so far is because we didn't have the mechanism for one of us to sign off on the invoices, right? So instead of going through the trouble of getting 7 signatures for all 3 of those, payables, we did it through ARPA. So just Mark signed off on it. But so I do think part of the conversation going forward is, as we do more and more of these signs, do we use all of our ARPA funds first, or do we do, some out of our historic commission budget? I mean, I don't think we need to talk about that now, but we should kind of establish where's the priority of funding coming from for the signs, because we can spend either of those buckets. But what is our priority for the rest of this year?
Yeah, and I think it's a matter of, I would leave it to you as the treasurer, maybe in consultation with the finance people,
Yeah.
to what is the optimal spend from which bucket, and you can report back to us
Sure.
on that.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
But so good. We've already authorized then the donation account, and that'll go, as I understand it, be processed sort of into effect once we submit the approved minutes, right?
Minutes.
That shows the vote. And then so what we need now again is just this vote that would authorize Annie as vice chair / treasurer and myself as chair to sign invoices. And these are just going to be these Signorama invoices at the moment that come in.
Correct.
So that we don't have to collect 7 signatures every single time. Does that make sense to everybody?
Yes.
So then what we would need is a motion, and correct me, Annie, if I get this wrong, a motion to authorize Annie Pfaff and myself, Kevin Miller, to, on behalf of the Historical Commission, to sign invoices for what authorized expenditures as they appear.
That's perfect.
I think that'll do it. Somebody make that motion, so I'm not making it.
I make the motion.
Thank you, Grant.
Yep.
I second it.
Okay, motion made by Grant and seconded by Michelle. Roll call vote. Annie?
Should I abstain or can I vote on this?
I think you can vote on it personally. I'm going to.
Okay, then I'll say yes.
Grant?
Yes.
Michelle?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
And Miller's aye. So 5-0. Again, this is just really bookkeeping. But thank you. And what I will, Annie, would you contact the finance people and ask them like to notify you when the form, let me know when the form or whatever form that needs to be signed by all of us is ready.
Yes.
Or you can send out to the whole commission simply saying
yeah.
the form is ready. Please go down to the townhouse and sign it.
Yes.
And I can catch up Jim and Kelly on what this is all about, or they can watch the recording.
Just on a logistical note, if we approve the minutes later today, I'll send it off tonight. So that clerk's office should have it tomorrow, and hopefully it'll be posted tomorrow for that.
Right, for December, that is.
The December and the November minutes. Yeah.
Right. Okay, awesome. So the other thing we have with the house signs program is with a couple of things very quickly. One is I went back and I had to watch that portion of our meeting last time and make sure I got what you wanted me to do with the language for the website for the Historic House Sign Program, exactly how you guys wanted it. And I did, and it's done. And I've contacted Hassan in IT, who's going to help us update our page, and we've got other updates to be made. And we haven't been able to connect yet, but that's imminent. And I previously had a conversation with Jay and Hassan, And they said it was a pretty simple process. I kept the typeface, I kept everything the same. So it'll be an easy sort of cut and paste out for them to update the page. That's that thing we spent all that time on last meeting. So that's one thing. Annie has gotten the signs that I've got the payments for. She has them in possession, and when she gets back from Florida, can start, giving them out, which is great news, and people will be very happy about that. As soon as the language gets updated on the website, I'm going to reach out to Beth Malo at My Southborough and ask her to do a little piece, promoting the fact that we're up and running and taking applicants, and because prior to this, it's just been people that have contacted myself or Annie, who knew about the program and are interested in a sign, and so we've cleared that, and now that's what we did last time, and so now we've got room to run with this. So I think that'll bring that, a little bit of a kind of almost like a PR bump will get people interested. Yeah, Michelle.
So my question to you, what happens, if this really takes off and you get 50 houses that want signs?
It's a very good question. We have the money right now for probably 20.
I would say 15 more.
Yeah.
So Michelle, it's funny you ask that because I have the opposite concern. So the way our budget works is it's use it or lose it.
Mhm.
And I'm thinking, what if we don't get enough people interested before we lose this funding? So, part of what I wanted to talk about a little bit in this agenda item is, in addition to, having some, PR on My Southborough, do we do any other outreach, target any homes to make sure that we can take full advantage of, our budget monies for this? But yeah, you're right. If our outreach efforts are really good, we could have a waiting list, that we don't get to until, until our funding renews for next fiscal year.
Well, yeah, fiscal 25 is going to be July 1st, so
Yeah.
it's like, it's
And
not
that'll
that.
be here
Yeah, we
before
got-
you know it.
Yeah, I mean, we need to spend down I think the deadline on the ARPA money, I thought it was June 24.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
that's 5 months from now. And our regular $1,000 budget, which we have not spent a penny of, also goes away, you know what I mean, at the end of the fiscal year. So we actually have a pretty good chunk.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, yeah, if we give out, we exhaust both tranches. This is, of course, part of the reason to accept donations, because we may be filling back up a little bit with grateful recipients. I mean, like I said, I'm paying for mine, obviously. I know the Muddlicks want to, have indicated very strongly they want to kick in. So I think we may find ourselves kind of balancing out, pretty nicely. Fingers crossed. And worst comes to worst, we say you got to wait till the next fiscal year, and we can start giving them out again. And if the thing, eventually we run out of historic houses, but also maybe this, we got a quite modest budget, and I wouldn't have any trouble going in front of, advisory and asking for a little more if we were doing well. So, there's also that. So I'm not too worried. Yeah.
Thank you.
Famous last words. Go ahead, Grant.
Yeah, just a couple things. I think it's a great idea to reach out to My Southborough for the outreach. One thing I think I had mentioned at one of our previous meetings is I don't know if we want to get the donation stuff figured out first so that we can say, if you'd like to donate here and have it kind of be linked. I don't know how much value that would really have, but it could be nice.
I think for sure, because remember we included that rhetoric in the language for the website. that I have to get our good friends at IT to get all that language updated before I would even dream of reaching out to
Mhm.
Beth or, whatever. So I think because the application process, as we sort of try to streamline it or simplify it, is always going to involve contact between the commission and probably in most cases myself and or Annie, that they'll, I think that'll naturally flow in the conversation that and without
Okay.
any pressure. I'm no salesman, but like if
Yeah.
you want, if you're, if you're interested in such and such, this is how to do it. And Annie, make sure like you're able to clarify that for us. Like it, for instance, a check would be written to the town of Southborough, if I'm not
Yes.
mistaken, right?
It's definitely the town of Southborough. And I would probably do a memo, like in the check memo line, historical commission donation. So there's no confusion, but it's definitely town of Southborough. And the select board does have to vote to accept each and every donation, which is fine. There's always a couple on their agendas every so often. So I don't think it's a big deal, and it's not like we're gonna be getting hundreds of donations. At least not in 1 year. So, yeah, so it's I think it's pretty straightforward. I think we already have that information confirmed.
And,
And
and,
then-
and, and if we do get a lot of donations, I'm sure they'll be only too happy to, vote them through, because that's less money we're going to want from, in a budget. And we've been holding steady actually for a number of years and have turned money back, and we've been kind of good stewards. So.
And then following up on Annie, I think you had a great idea there about whether we want to do further outreach. One thing I was thinking about is that maybe we could, only since you just mentioned it, is maybe we could take a look at the properties on Macris before a certain date, or that have been categorized as whatever we want to consider historic, and I don't know, target those properties in some way or figure out which ones have house signs. But maybe we could do like a targeted campaign to, if there's a 1700s house that doesn't have a sign or something, to make sure that they get one or something like that.
Yeah. So
Great idea.
I was prepared to talk to some of that tonight. So there's several hundred properties that technically qualify. And I think if we were to do a mailing out to, everyone, not only does that get like, of course the postage gets expensive, and would take away from our ability to, do more signs. Um, do we want to review the list of qualified properties and kind of target ones either based on age, it the oldest, the oldest structures in town, and or their historical significance or historical importance, or just ones that we happen to have, a relationship or a connection with the current homeowner, and could have a conversation with them directly on whether they would be interested. So, um, I would kind of be in favor of kind of doing a combination of all of those. So maybe what I could do is um, run a list just based on age of the qualifying properties and cross-reference which houses already have signs, and then maybe come back, share it like a shared Google document with all of you guys. And then between now and the next meeting, maybe we could all, take a look at the list and say, okay, here are the 5 or 10 we, houses that we each think would be really good, a really good fit for this house sign program or something like that. Just so we all have a little bit of input, and we're not just blasting it out there to hundreds of homes. When, we don't know if each and every home would even really be a good candidate. It could be used as a rental and or something like that. We don't know every single house. So what do you guys think of that approach?
I think that's a great idea.
I do
ahead.
think it's, go ahead, I'm sorry. Brett.
No, go ahead, Michelle.
So I think it's a great idea, Andy. It sounds like a lot of work. I don't know if you're planning on doing that right away, but I do think outreach is really going to be important. And obviously you are the owner of the house sign list. And
I've been meaning to share it. So Kevin has access to it. It's already a Google Doc. I've been meaning to share it. I just these meetings sneak up on me and then I forget about it. So yes, no, I mean to be the keeper of the data. This is something that we all kind of have ownership of. So I'm
Yes.
sorry it hasn't made its way to you guys, to everyone else yet.
Oh, that's okay. I was just
I would-
thinking that, do you wait to put this out on My Southborough and then see what the response is and then become more aggressive with the outreach campaign, or?
Oh, that's
I
a
think
great.
that's personally what I would suggest is that let's get, like I said, I'm gonna make this happen. I was trying to do it on Friday, and actually Jay and Hassan were out in the field. They had a server problem somewhere in town, and we're off trying to put out fires. But I'm gonna try to get that done this week, and then I can reach out and we see what response we get. And then I love the idea of Annie's a sort of targeted list. I think Dan has some thoughts on this too. Did you have anything, Dan?
I mean, I've talked with, given Faye's, the number of historic buildings within the Faye school property.
Yeah.
So I talked with our director of facilities, Diane Byrne, who also then talked with headmaster Rob Gustafson. I think they've kind of tabled it for right now. But certainly I think part of that is the departure of Rob at the end of this school year and the kind of a new head of school coming in June. So I think that's probably part of it. But certainly Faye has several historic houses that, and I do think that we should be targeting Main Street, because as much as we do with the kind of this idea of the historic Southborough, especially the work that was done in conjunction at St. Mark's Church, I do think that that's something that should be an area of focus.
Well, I have to say, Dan, the dream of my life is to put one of these historic house signs on the Doc Stone house one fine day. When that gets successfully resolved, I put myself to sleep at night thinking
Kevin,
about
that gave me the goosebumps thinking about it. We have to make that happen.
I mean, it'll be, and I really think that's still going to come to pass, for what it's worth. And it has to do, I think, with the leadership transition over at Faye that is slowing things, but not derailing them. And similarly, I like the targeted idea. I have one in mind, for instance, where I'd like to see one would be at 1 Main Street, which is the Knights of Columbus building. That's the Nathan and Sally Bannister house, built in 1805. And apparently formerly sited where the old post office is, and it was moved. I mean, that's an unbelievably historic building. And, the KFC folks, of course, did us a big solid, allowing us to, when they get finally put in the ground, put one of our National Register signs on their property, which they didn't have to do. But you know what I mean? That's a very historic building in the very heart of the commercial part of the downtown. And that building should have a marker on it. So I've got my notions. I think that if Annie were to make that list of the existing signs available, and then people could look at the Macris, look around in their world, maybe come up with some likely candidates, I would be all for that. A little, targeted marketing, possibly to follow that initial bit of news, I suppose, on my South Row. Go ahead, Michelle.
Okay, I actually am just stewing here because I'm just thinking where the most appropriate signs were. You know, Dan mentioned Main Street. So the historic village,
Yeah,
we should have who's ever in that historic village is really who we should start the target. I mean, just to go from Main Street to Bay School and down the side streets. I think that would be a really good start to this
Mhm.
Yeah.
project.
I also feel very strongly at the same time about targeting the other historic villages in town. I mean, in other words, going in Southville and Fayetteville and making sure that, you know, that we're not just focused, you know, a number of us live, for instance, along, you know, in the sort of Main Street in the Register District, but that to make sure that we're sort of reaching out on other parts of town. So I think this is a good plan going forward. Annie, make sure that you would you when your vacation ends to sort of you know, give everybody access to. You're better at that than I am. I can do it, but
Yeah.
you're better.
Yep. And if I would say, so I'm gone and through Thursday. If you guys don't hear from me by like early next week, just ping me, you know, send me a text or something and I'll get it done. I have a tendency to kind of put this stuff on the back burner, but I know it's important and I've been meaning to get that to you guys for months. So I will do it, I promise.
Don't worry, I can be
Thank-
exceedingly annoying.
Thank
We'll keep on it. So good. All right, we'll move on from that. And with thanks for everybody. I'm going to try to go through some things really quick now. The signage for the rural cemetery water tower. You may recall that, you know, we had that little bit of leftover ARPA money, and I was able to persuade our friends at the select board to give us $1,000 for the historic house signs program. And then I took a guess how much it would cost to, and asked for this and explained what it was for a sign for the rubble stone water tower in the rural cemetery. And as you remember, it was on the grounds that nobody seemed to, that anybody I ran into in town, including the real old timers, seemed to know what the hell that thing was. It's that beautiful stone structure, sort of straight back from the main entrance, up to 2.5 stories. It's apparently got a worn out shingled roof, and it was kind of brought into my, I walk by it all the time, but it was really brought into my attention because the new DPW head had contacted me about the roofing on that and saying he wanted to re-roof it because it's in appalling condition. And I was wildly enthusiastic and did a bunch of research on the tower for him. And it was mostly having to do like with what would have been an appropriate roof. And we're pretty sure it was cedar. Certainly not asphalt shingles, which it has now, because they were only invented the year that tower was built, which was 1903. So, you know, so the select board gave us $1,000 for the historic house signs and 500 at my request for a sign to mark, note with date, and explain what in hell that thing is, because nobody knew. And it's a great story. And it's listed, by the way, as one of the assets in the National Register District inside the confines of the rural cemetery, which of course is in the district. So just to get the ball rolling and to get an idea of what might be possible, I went back to the vendor that did our National Register signs because they were both reasonable. Annie, who did most of the dealings with them, all the direct dealings, found them wonderful to work with. They produced, you know, alas, there's, you know, the winter, the snow, the ice, and all the stuff has further delayed DPW getting our signs in. But I know we've had many conversations about this, and they're going to get done. And Annie and I, you know, went out and staked out all the locations, and it's all ready to go. And we're just waiting for some decent weather to get these things in. But I've seen the signs in person, and they are stunning, just stunning. I mean, a real high quality product. So just to get a preliminary, let me go back to Franklin Bronze. That was the vendor, and see what they say about this. So I wrote up some text, and just to remind you, I'll show you for a second what the National Register signs look like. So for instance, that was that's a mock-up. That's what I think it was Annie and myself, and I guess Kate Battles walked around one day, and I was holding it up at sort of the right height, and we were taking photos to see how it would look. But that's done like a, what do you call that, foam core. That's not the actual sign. They look way better than that. They look, like I said, stunning. But that's what the National Register signs that'll be on these poles look like. So I sent some text to Franklin, and I wanted to come up with a sign that was sort of in the same manner. Can you guys see that? That's what I got back. So again, this is all just to get a ballpark. I did this to wanted to see, and it turns out that I have a future in bronze estimation, because I asked, like I said, the select board for $500 for this project, and you know what the bid for this is? $504.80.
Mhm.
I'll tell you what, I'll kick in the $5 myself if it came to this. But this sign would be 10 by 14, which is big enough to be seen, but wouldn't overpower anything. And I imagine it, if you know that water tower, there are double wooden doors in the front of it that need to be refinished, by the way. I imagine this mounted on the doors. It could go on the stone, but might sit better because the stone is very uneven. Might sit better on one of the doors. Again, this is all subject to discussion and debate, but just I wanted to get an idea if I had grossly underestimated or overestimated what a sign like this would cost. I put the town seal back on it. Rural Cemetery Water Tower, the year it was built. It was authorized at town meeting in 1900, actually, but then there were delays because of the cost of piping. And then I thought it was appropriate to explain what this was. And so, I just had one line, a windmill. The system was a windmill and a well that pumped the water up to a holding tank on the second floor, the second level of the structure. And then again, the groundskeepers of the rural cemetery used this to irrigate grass and shrubbery in the summer because they were complaining in 1900 that the cemetery would go brown all the time. So that's the explanation. A windmill once pumped well water into a holding tank inside to irrigate the grounds, either in summer. I think that's what I wrote, and the designer thought I was too poetic there, I think, and changed it to during the summer in the suggested wording on the right. And then added Southborough Historical Commission, because that's typically done, who's erected the sign at the bottom. And like I said, for 10 by 14, the price is exactly the amount of money we were given. Any thoughts on this? Is this completely off base? Would you want something else? Anybody? Again, this was just, I sent this in just so I could get an idea if I was completely out of my mind thinking that we could do this for $500. It turns out we can.
So I'll
we
start.
have-
I
oh.
love it. I think it looks great. I love that it has a similar shape and style to the other signs that are going to be, placed throughout the, downtown district. Design wise, it feels a little crowded. I wonder if like making the logo or the town seal a little bit smaller, and just respacing some of the things, might make it just a little, just, I don't know, appear a little bit better visually. But I think it's great. I mean, it's great as it is. And then Kevin, you would know the answer to this. So where it says a windmill once pumped, well watered, da 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 da. Should that have a period at the end because it's like technically a sentence, or because it's appearing on a sign and is just supposed to be a description, is it fine to not have a period?
Well, no expert on this kind of signage am I. I think it could go either way, to be honest with you.
Okay.
I wouldn't object to a period. It would probably only cost us an extra $1, you know? So yeah, sure.
But I've never, I mean, I don't know. I'm curious to know if anyone else has thoughts on it.
Yeah, I thought that, I did think some of the line spacing, like that sentence about the windmill and the tank and all, I would kind of close that up a little bit.
Yeah.
So there was a little bit more of a gap actually between the Built and the Southborough Historical Commission, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, I agree with you that I think fine tuning, like if people like this, would be called for. And by the way, they look a lot less brassy in person. They look much more rich, you know, like but yeah, and I like I said, I proposed it to them in this manner because it so echoes
Mhm.
what we have in this.
Mhm.
One of these will be across the street adjacent to that raised, you know, there's that tee box with the elevated stand coming up on Corderville Road on the right side opposite the cemetery. That's where the district begins,
Mhm.
basically. So
Kevin,
go ahead.
do we not know when the water tower was rendered obsolete? Because I think
Yeah,
that's an important component to the sign that is missing.
I think that's an excellent point. I thought a great deal about it. I did as much research as I had time to do, frankly, on this, and I couldn't find the answer. And I actually reached out to Michael Wyson at the Historical Society to see if he knew anything about it. The tower isn't mentioned, for instance, in Fences of Stone, or anything else I had ready access to. And I asked Michael about it, and he said he didn't know. We both speculated that it was probably discontinued with the coming of town water. But we're not quite sure exactly. You know, it's like in the same way that this tower was authorized in 1900. They put up the windmill, dug the well, and then they ran out of money for the pipe. And then there was $198 and something cents reauthorized in 01 or 02 to actually build the tower itself. So apparently back in 1903, you could get a stone tower for $200. You know, the sign is costing 2.5 times that. But I don't know the answer to that, Dan. And I would be in favor of adding that to it. It would be easy to add that to that sentence. You know, a windmill pumped well water to a holding tank inside to irrigate the grounds in summer until 1938 or whatever, 1935 or whatever it is. I just couldn't find it out. I don't suppose you'd want to take that on, would you?
Sure. I asked the question.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Now you never ask another, but I mean, I think it's a great question. And if you had some time to sort of run that one down, at least if you can't get anywhere, you can go back and say, I couldn't find it either. And then we have to give up, you know? But I actually think it's probably findable, outable, you know?
I mean, it has to be part of town budget, right? And
Right.
it's upkeep. So if you've got enough information to know that it was built and how much it took to cost to build it, there's got to be some sort of record of maintaining it.
Right.
Um,
Yeah, I agree with you, and I think that could be traced down. I think maybe I rationalized not going further with that because well, that'll just take more letters, you know. But I agree with you. I would like to see it on there, and if you had time to try to look into this quickly, I mean, I don't know. Maybe actually Jim Hegarty could sort of steer us. You know what I mean? Where he thinks we might be able to readily come up with this because he's got the documents.
yeah,
But the society folks, you know, Michael wasn't able to help me. So, yeah,
Okay.
if you don't mind, what about the rest? Grant, I'm sorry, I see your hand up. I didn't catch it
Oh.
before.
No, that's fine. I didn't want to cut off the conversation. Yeah, I really liked it a lot. I think so. I pulled up a couple pictures while you guys were talking of a couple pictures of historical marker signs that I had taken in other towns. And they weren't bronze, but just like the general theme that I have kind of seen. I always find it interesting when I go to different towns and they have their historical markers to check them out, is oftentimes like a smaller, more horizontally themed or oriented marker with like the date, the the historical commission, the name of the building if it has one, and then kind of more oftentimes like a more in-depth detail or sentence or two about kind of either the what you have here about what its use was, or even just like a kind of fun fact almost about it. And so I think for me, since it's such an interesting building, that if we can get any more detail on there, that would be great to, even stuff about, well, I don't know about how interesting that pipe story is, right? But like, stuff like that. Oh, it took 3 years to build or 5 years to build, or this was a major effort, or, any other kind of description I think could really add to it. But if you'd like, I do have two pictures here that I just copied over to my computer. If you'd like me to share just kind of what I've seen in other towns.
Sure, just did it.
Great. All right, just give me a second. And I'm not saying these are great, but this is just like the general theme that I've seen. Can you see my desktop?
Yes.
Okay, so these are both from Maynard. Again, I just pulled them off my phone. I think I've taken pictures of ones in Hudson and other places, but these are just two. I actually went to, it's a very fine independent movie house, old time, from the 40s, if you're interested, in Maynard. But they have these kind of things. So you have the seal of I guess it's the town, the year, the title, and then kind of if there is any more detail about kind of the history of the use, that kind of thing. And so just personally, I think if we can get any more detail on there about its history and really any other information, I think that would be nice in my opinion.
Yeah, I would say that in this particular case, most of what I got was from the Macris report, and not sure there's all that much to add. Those are interesting. I'm so glad that ours won't get beat up like that one in the Fine Arts Theater. It's got a little scratched and marked, and we're fortunate in a way to have gotten
Sure.
the $500 designated for this, because like I said, it somehow specced out to exactly what I had guessed it was going to be. If there were to add a lot more text, you'd have to change the material, because it does add considerably. Although I'm personally mostly in favor of Dan's notion about, if we could find the date of its discontinuance, I think would be really hugely valuable.
Yeah, or even what it's made of. You said it
Yeah.
was a rubble tower.
Yeah.
Any,
Well, I
yeah,
did want
any
to ask,
additional historical architectural details, maybe something that, yeah, that we think is, I don't know, that's just that was my original thoughts, so.
the one thing I did want to ask Mr. Cundiff if I could get in there sometime, because I want to see if the tank is still extant on the upper level.
Hmm.
And if so, what it's made out of. Because right now that building is, as I understand it, simply used for storage. I think the hoses and, you know, rakes kind of thing, but that so that would be, and incidentally, not to wander off, because then this conversation will go on forever, but I did have a conversation with the CPC chair because I view, like I said, Bill Cundiff wanted to re-roof it, and that, I think that's kind of on hold at the moment. But it's one of those, it would be, in my estimation, a really good CPC project, because there's more than just the roof that actually needs addressing. Trusses need painting. There's wood on sort of arrow slot kind of vent windows that need addressing. The front door needs to be stripped and refinished. There was some very poor patch pointing done there that doesn't match the rest of the mortar. I don't know what the rest of the mortar, the structure looks rather good to me, but it would be nice to see it have a thorough going over. And the roof that's on there has been worn out for about 25 years and probably has been leaking quite a bit. So it may be that when they get in there, it's going to be a more extensive job than anybody thinks. And it's one of those things that I think a decent expenditure could really, but not excessive, could really, you know, tidy that building up so we don't get into one of these St. Mark's Bell Tower kind of situation, you know. Obviously it's much smaller, but you know what I mean. I'm kind of looking, I am looking at sort of the larger picture with this. I mean, if we could find out if the tank is still there, I don't know if I'd put that on a sign or not. I don't know what the rest of you think about it. I guess, Grant, I'm not sure how much more of a story with that there is to be told. The stuff that's in the Macris reports that reference it is fairly, you know, the groundskeeper said we need water. This was the solution. Iron pipe got expensive at one point. And so they ran out of money. And we have the names, for instance, of who actually built it. And so on, although if I recall, like it was invoiced out to the cemetery superintendent, who I would not assume was the stonemason that actually assembled it. So I don't, you know what I mean? Like we have some names associated, but it doesn't seem to have a particularly, you know, vast history, except as this utilitarian, and to my eye, quite beautiful structure. So, I don't know, Michelle or Annie, do you have anything?
I don't have anything to add.
No.
Well, how about, if you don't either, Michelle, how about we and if Dan is going to go look into when the tower was discontinued, just to address Grant's concern, I think you know, Dan, if you come up, or if Grant, you want to do some digging yourself, or if you come up with something that's really juicy, then let's consider, you know what I mean, a reformatting of the thing that would allow for a slightly more expansive story to be told. And if we don't, then maybe it points us toward a more simplified sign. I'm not, by the way, wedded to the idea of that particular format. I did it again because I thought it would be consistent with the National Register signs, and there was some appeal in that for me. And also because putting those elements together, I could get a rough estimate of the cost. And like I said, I was so shocked that it came in within $5 of what our budget actually is.
The
So
prices were,
I know I do feel like I got the rangefinder I hit the button at the right moment, and Bob Barker is going to come flying out and give me a Pontiac, you know?
Yeah, I
So
guess I'll just say I wouldn't characterize it as a concern, just as it's my first time viewing it. So as with all these things, it just I think we want to make sure that we get the language right. And
right,
same with the revolutionary graves, you just want to be thorough. And so if we look everywhere and we don't find any other information, then
right.
but maybe we can spend the time to I haven't done digging myself, but I can take a look into it, see if I find anything.
Well, good. If you, I mean,
Okay.
maybe you and Dan can, just share notes and do a little digging, each of you. And if you come up with something good, come back to us and we'll try to, cobble this together next time and
Yeah.
and move forward. I wasn't expecting any approval tonight. Like I said, I just wanted to, I'm committed to trying to make progress on this and see where we can go. So,
Definitely.
thank you, everybody. So let me move on then. We'll table that, and I'll give you the other thing that I'm looking at. I asked Jim last time to take a look at the business of this bit of signage. And again, this was one thing where this has been sitting in the flag school in possession of the Historical Society for, Michael Wison tells me, at least 20 years. And this is for these bridge abutments, the granite abutments. This is on Parkerville South of Route 9, for the old Boston Worcester Street Railway. And we think we've figured out why this sign was never installed, right? I was asking Jim, and he didn't get a chance to do it, so I talked to Michael directly, that it mounts like a picture frame almost. It's got mounts, like almost accept like a bolt on the back, and you sort of would, I think the apparently was an earlier iteration of the Historical Commission that commissioned this sign, and they thought it was going to go straight on the granite abutments. Well, that stone is unbelievably uneven. It's not like a smooth surface. It's not like the Washington Monument where you can mount something straight on. This is why I proposed mounting the water tower sign on the doors, which are flat, whereas the stone is not. You'd either have to notch out the stone, which is a sort of defacing of the artifact, essentially. And so I think they commissioned this sign, got it made. This is like a cautionary tale to all of us, and then realized that it was almost impossible to install as originally envisioned. You follow what I'm saying? So it seemed to me, it's like, what I think you would want to do with this, and tell me you guys what you think of this, is that, and I should have taken a photograph of the site so you could see it, but you can all just hop in your cars or walk or bike down to, well, not in this weather, drive, will you? Down on Parkerville and see these abutments. It's a fascinating story, and it has a little bit more text than what I was proposing on the water tower. And notice, to Dan's point, and maybe Grant's, is that it does talk about when service on this line ended and when the rails were scrapped, and why it appears as it does now. But it seems to me that the solution to this is to have the back altered so as to accept pole mounting, and that you would mount this on a pole in front of the abutment, perhaps as you drive south on Parkerville. That seemed to be the more logical sighting. But you follow what I'm saying? So that you would not try to mount this on the stone abutments themselves, but that you would place it somehow, in a way that obviously doesn't interfere with the view of them, but on a pole. and that would require a modification of the sign. Anybody have any thoughts on this? I'd like to kind of look again with your approval to try to look into how, clearly it would have to be done locally. That's a heavy piece of bronze. How it could be modified, perhaps by like a bronze shop or a machine metal shop, so as to accept. It might be it would take a bracket underneath that the sign would actually slot down into, but you'd have to find some way to secure it. This is going to be a pain in the neck. And in discussing this with Michael Wyson, I think the theory is this is why the damn thing never got put up in the first place. Like I said, because they got it and then they realized that they'd kind of boxed themselves into a corner. But it's not doing anybody any good sitting in the basement of the flags school. So, Michelle.
Just a suggestion. Do you think the vendor that you've been working with, was it Franklin? Franklin, you said?
Yeah.
Do you think that they might have any suggestions on how to mount it on a pole, or what modifications and how much it would cost?
We can ask, but they're in Pennsylvania, so that it makes it a little more complex. Yeah, I mean, I don't know what Annie thinks about it. Annie's the one that's dealt with them more directly than I did. I have to say they were not as lovely as they were and as fine a work as they do. They seem to sort of regard, as a lot of manufacturers do, that their involvement ends when the product arrives successfully at the destination, and they don't care how you install it. We had a lot of go round with them involving DPW's concern for installing the National Register signs, and finally got that kind of worked out with Chris Leroy. So I'm not sure they're likely to be much help, but we can certainly ask. But we don't want to ship it to Pennsylvania to be modified.
Right.
Yeah,
I think we're better served finding a more local company that does similar work that we might be able to actually give the business.
Right.
If that was, if it was something that was possible to do, I would be more in favor of trying to find someone local. And I do think I actually did talk to some local bronze companies. It's just that Franklin Bronze happened to have the best pricing when we did that exercise for our National Register District sign. So I'm happy to look through my files to see if there were any more local companies we had identified and maybe talked with at some point in the process.
Annie, that would be great if you could do that. And this
Yeah.
is one that I don't think is quite urgent. I'm more concerned about getting these National Register signs up, quite frankly, and I don't think that's going to happen now until spring, alas. That's my update on that, is that it's been delayed. But I think because I did discuss this sign actually with Mr. Cundiff in one of our conversations, and he was like, he said, well, I think his line was, I'm just the hammer. You got to figure out what you want me to do. And if you're able to glean some insight about how we could, I think there might be brackets available that you would sit the sign on top of. I think there's a possibility for a rear mount. But my estimation, I think anybody would tell you that it would be a kind of vandalism to drill into those abutments or to try to chisel them flat so as to accept this thing. And again, that's the problem they got into in the first place. So stay tuned on that. We'll just, we'll hold this one. But again, I'd like to get it out of them. Sitting in the flag school for 20 years isn't doing any of us any good. Okay, so members report. Grant, I guess we did the main thing on the CPC, which was Jim's thing, but do you want to update us on?
Sure.
World of the world.
CPC's been busy. I think we've had 3 meetings or something since our last historical meeting, and we have another meeting this week. So anyway, it's been a busy time as we're trying to finalize the warrant app, or as we're trying to finalize the process of ultimately getting warrant articles created for various applications. So currently where we stand is my subjective take is that there are probably likely 3 projects that will move forward to the town meeting warrant. So the golf course committee, we're going to vote on it. I'm not sure how we're going to vote on it, but based on the sense of the committee, I'm assuming that will likely pass. So that's for the new irrigation system. Jim's request for the documents, we'll be voting on that as well as the Trails Committee. They had a proposal to finalize the Peninsula Trail for some extra footbridges and stuff like that to connect that all. So those are kind of the current 3 projects that I think have a good chance of going forward. 2 of our applications that we had previously talked about have withdrawn from this cycle. So that's the Southborough Historical Society's Fable Hall application, as well as the Boston Road application. So those won't be moving forward in this cycle. But so that's my current update. We have a meeting on Wednesday, I think, to move forward with the warrant articles likely, and then we'll be finalizing them and going through that whole process. So that's where things stand now.
You guys have been busy, so you are meeting again this week.
Yes, on the 24th, I believe. Yeah.
Wednesday, you're busy.
Yeah.
Thank you, Grant. Michelle, anything on pilot?
So we're not as busy as Grant, but I have to say, so it's been a little bit of a slow launch for this committee as we've struggled to have a quorum for our meetings. However, we just added 2 new members to alleviate the problem, and that's Tony Schoner, who comes from Capital, and also a citizen, Peru Sharma. So she's joined us as well. So we all basically now have some goals that we're going to contact other towns and to continue gathering information to find out how other towns are handling the pilot payments.
Good, and I think we were talking about the opening of the meeting. You're now taking their minutes, right?
Yes.
Good for you.
Yes.
Yeah, I hear you do a good job on that.
Well, they're a little bit more abbreviated than this committee, so I'm happy about it.
Jim, who's Blaschke, who of course sits on the Tricentennial Committee, again, who's in London tonight and so couldn't join us, reports good progress on that. I don't want to say more because I don't have it on the agenda, but they're moving forward, and we'll have him update us next time. Next thing we have is, actually, I heard from the chair of the select board over the weekend. A couple months ago, there was an agreement by the select board to form a committee to explore the future usage of 21 Highland Street. That's the South Union School. And they constituted what that committee was going to be. And I'm just looking at my other monitor to remind myself that the composition of that committee was slated to have 7 members, 1 from open space, 1 from the planning board, 1 from the recreation committee, 2 members who live within a half mile of the property. This is from the town website. 1 at-large member and 1 member of the historical commission. So 7 people. And what happened subsequently was that that committee was sort of, I think, moved to the back burner while the select board negotiated a possible deal, I suppose, with another entity in town. But at this point, I was given to understand they want to move forward with the committee. So, I was asked if I would bring it forward to historical, and we could, nominate somebody so that this thing can be seated and get going. So I'm open to what folks think or what they want or what you want to say about it. I will say up front that I'm very interested actually in representing us on this particular committee, because I think it's partly because I did a lot of research on 21 Highland to try to be ready for that joint meeting that we had, for instance, with Shopsy and Rec, and it was open space and us, and feel this is really, 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 really important, not only to that neighborhood in particular, but to Southborough at large, and the fact that South Union School, as you well know, is one of only 2 individually National Register listed properties in Southborough, gives it a particular sort of urgency. So I have strong feeling toward it, but this is, a commission with, currently 5 people here to vote on this. So I'm if other people are interested, let me know and we can figure out what we want to do. But like I said, I think this is one, and the charge of this committee, by the way, I don't know if there's a typo here, but it says they're expecting an interim report no later than January 1st, 2024. Well, that's come and gone. And an interim recommendation no later than the 15th of May, and that the charge will expire on June 30th. So I think those dates are going to move a little bit, but I think the intention by the select board is that they want not a lot of shilly-shallying around. They want some quick, decisive thinking and recommendations, which of course I'm a little, but just be honest with you, a little cautious about this, because in fact there is no select board, at least as it's listed here, and as I recall it. I thought there was going to be a select board member on this committee, but it appears, at least as it's printed on the town website, that won't be the case. And so I you have a certain wariness that you're not going into a kind of echo chamber, but I feel very committed to trying to bring forward some sort of positive recommendation, and to represent. This actually goes to also this whole issue we'll have now, once we appoint here people on 4 different committees. This is an ad hoc committee, but to have someone on Pilot, CPC, Tricentennial, and this committee, it's a big pull for us, but it also raised the question for me as to, until this point, I think quite rightly, in the sense that, like, I have the utmost confidence and faith in Grant on CPC to represent us and represent the views of historical. I think it's even a greater challenge for Michelle, and whom I have complete confidence on Pilot, because historical's relation to Pilot is not that clear to me. I'm just grateful that we have somebody really smart from our group on it. It's clearer for Jim, again, who I have a lot of confidence in Tricentennial, and whoever goes on the 21 Highland thing, I think it's going to be really important that that person communicate very, very, very clearly with the rest of the commission, and listen very clearly to what the rest of the commission wants, because it raises that very interesting question about how much discretion, as you know what I mean, as we serve as a representative on another committee, how much discretion do we really have? And until this point, you know, you just believe in the people you nominate and trust that they're going to do, you know, and also with the knowledge that, for instance, on CPC, Grant can't come running back to us every single time there's a, you know what I mean, an issue and say, well, what should I do? You know, he's got to use his judgment and make a decision and move, you know what I mean, and vote. But I think the idea, as I conceive of it personally, is that all of our actions on other committees where we represent historicals informed by a certain shared set of values, but then also when there are very key decisions that we have to come back, you know what I mean, and consult. So I think, for instance, the 21 Highland Future Use Committee is one that sort of really goes to the core of what we're all about. Certainly, if I were to be the one representing us there, that's would be my sense of how I had to comport myself. If that makes sense? So I would like to just quickly on the floor to, if you guys have thoughts on this, or if somebody else really feels really strongly and wants to do it, you know, throw your hat in the ring. Like I said, I rather than beat around the bush, wanted to be just plain that I think, and because, frankly, because it's going to be a short duration mission. I think if they said it was going to be the next 3 years, I'd be like, no, thank you. I don't have the bandwidth, but I think I could manage this for a couple months.
I mean, considering how you represented all of us at that joint meeting, and how well you represented kind of the mission, but then also the importance of 21 Highland Street, recommend, Kevin, that you do it. I mean, it's going to take, I think, in the end, it's going to take a lot of horsepower, and it is frustrating to me that there is not a selectman on the board or in this group. I'm not sure if that is a warning sign, but it definitely seems to be a place of distancing itself from the process.
Well,
Yeah.
like I said, Dan, I'm yeah, you know, thoughtful on that point, and I think there's a way to sort of read it both ways, I guess, and I'm trying to take it as a desire not to meddle and to give the committee its head, you know, its lead, and see what happens. But yeah, we'll see. I mean, I think the only thing you can do is sort of go into it in good faith and try to bring out a good recommendation. And then it will be up to the select board and the voters of the town, you know, how they feel about it.
Yeah, I'll just say, Kevin, I think you'd be a great choice for the committee. It's an issue that I care a lot about, and I expect I'll stay active in. But just in terms of my capacity right now and everything, I don't think I could take it on. So I think you'd be the better choice anyway. And yeah, I look forward to supporting your nomination.
Kevin, I fully support you representing us for that committee as well. And similar to Grant, I'm interested in the topic, but I personally just don't have capacity to, you know, join another committee at this time. And think you would be a great representative if you're interested.
Michelle, anything?
No, I just want to veto not veto. I also want to reiterate that I feel that you'd be the best choice for the committee. You did a great job on the presentation to that combined meeting, and I just think that you would definitely be the one committed with all the information.
Well, you were all incredibly kind, and so I don't want to turn this into like my eulogy or you know, or a roast or whatever it is. So maybe let's just move on and vote this, and I can stop bothering you with this stuff.
I make a motion that we nominate Kevin Miller to be the Historical Commission's representative to the 21 Highland Future Use Committee.
Second that?
So all right, motion made by Grant, seconded by Michelle. I thank you both. We'll roll call vote this. Annie,
Yes.
Grant,
Yes.
Michelle,
Yes.
Dan.
Yes.
Miller abstains, so 4-0, and thank you also kindly in your confidence, and I'm going to try to do right by you all. And I must say, I mean, in all seriousness, I would like, you have to, obviously contact me individually. We can't deliberate by chain or any of that stuff, but I'm very much interested in your input. And I would like to, at our next meeting, devote some time. We're running long again, but I'd like to devote some meeting next time. And I think there'll be time for that. To hear formally kind of what you think my marching order should be from you. And I mean, I have a broad general sense of what we stand for with regard to this building, but I would like to put your thinking caps on, and come back next meeting with some concrete ideas that I can take over there and wow them with, and give you credit as the originators of those ideas. All right, so now we're on to approving meeting minutes from 11/29 first. Those were posted in draft form very helpfully by Grant, because you recall we didn't get to vote on them last time. But Grant has circulated those and they're up. And I was very happy with them, and had weighed in on the revisions. If anybody have anything, amendments or line reads for a Grant on the minutes of November 29th, 2023? Nope. Everybody good?
Yes.
I'm going to make a motion to approve the draft minutes that have previously been posted by Grant for November 29th, 2023. Need a second.
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 Okay, second by Annie. Okay, roll call vote. Annie,
Yes.
Grant,
Yes.
Michelle,
Yes.
Dan,
Yes.
Miller is aye. 5-0, approved, November 29th. Now, December 19th. That was the meeting where we had, probably the main event was Mr. Deli Priscoli and talking about Burnett Mansion and all that. And again, I offered Grant some edits, and I think you've incorporated those and you circulated that, right? And
Yes, I think that's the November ones. That was the Burnett property ones.
Oh,
but
was
yes.
it?
Yeah.
Oh, right. December was the the meeting that was supposed to be really brief on the
Yes.
Historic House Side
The
program. but
15-minute meeting that went for 2 hours.
we got into the weeds for. Hey, you guys were the ones who were offering all the corrections, but whatever. You're right. That was December 19th. So again, I've looked over the minutes. Does anybody else have any edits on those minutes? Are you happy with them? Any corrections?
Jim sent along a correction that I didn't have a chance to implement. So if you don't mind, I'll have to pull up his email to see what he said. It was just a simple one, I think. But he sent it out later last night, and I didn't have a chance to do it. Just give me a second on that.
I did say that. He says,
I think it was on the historic house sign section. I'm just trying to find the
He says he is calling out this line, the HC also amended the requirement that had a house be either associated with a person, historic event, architectural
Oh.
style, period, or the cultural landscape or archaeology. Says that's unclear. We should specify the from and to language.
Okay, yeah, thank you. So I think that's line 30 in the December 19th. So let's see. HG also amended the requirement that
I would say
how about
to
that A, oh yeah, why don't you go ahead? Yeah.
well, I would say to from that those criteria to simply being consistent with the definition of a historic building as provided for in the Southborough zoning code, because that's essentially what we've come down to, that the structure be 85 years old or older, because basically we tried to sort of declutter.
Okay, so just
and-
cut that entire sentence. I think
Yeah, I mean, I think it
because
could
by
be
making it that it's only 85 years or older, you're inherently getting rid of whatever the other requirements
right.
were.
And
Okay.
yeah, and if you recall, you folks had me move that more hair slicing kind of rhetoric down to additional, which I did. I'm exactly per your instructions, down to it's now called in the bottom section of that document, additional information, in which it says a home or other structure to be evaluated in terms of its historical significance in a variety of ways, including period, style, historic event, persons, cultural landscape, archaeology. So we moved that rhetoric down to the bottom, if I'm making sense with that.
Mm-hmm. Can you see a Word document here?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so this is the change that I'm thinking to make. Did I get that correctly? So just cut the oh, sorry.
Yes, yeah,
Okay.
exactly. I think that's perfect. Can you
Okay.
guys see that? Grant, this is where Grant's editing is line 28, 29, and 30.
So just delete that sentence. That
Yeah,
I agree. I think it's cleaner that way without it. So
is that okay with everybody? I like it. I think it's good. I'm gonna move a motion to accept the December 19th, 2023 minutes as amended. Any second on this?
second.
Okay, so motion by the chair, seconded by Grant. Roll call vote, Annie,
Yes.
Grant,
Yes.
Joe,
Yes.
Dangerous Dan,
Yes.
and Miller is aye. So 5-0 approving the December 19th minutes as amended. Other business, almost there, friends. Just to make note of a couple things, which we won't discuss. One is I got an email about updating my conflict of interest training, and I encourage you all, if you got a similar email, to deal with it. Secondly, as I said earlier, I had a very good conversation the other day with the CPC chair, Ben Smith, about as I mentioned earlier, that the select board has sort of charged Marguerite Landry and myself to kind of coordinate a whole bunch of issues basically surrounding the town center. Everything from, we've got a long list of things, everything from the howitzer, the World War I howitzer that's on the town green, to that granite post and iron rail fencing that surrounds the green that's in such terrible shape. The water tower in the OBG, not in the rural cemetery, I'm sorry, some fencing issues and gravestone issues in the OBG. And I should have had a good conversation with Ben about possibly packaging all this stuff together as a CPC project going forward. So I just wanted to put that on your radar because I think it may be a good thing for us to get behind going forward, but the cycle, which is just, as Grant has explained so ably, is just now concluding. So we would be sort of getting on board for this for the next cycle. So there's plenty of time for that. Also, one of the things that I'm going to bring to the attention of the 21 Highland Future Use Committee is the Massachusetts Preservation Project Fund, which is now in its round 30 cycle. I don't know, given the timing of this, that we would make it, but the deadline for that is March 15th, 2024. There's a big pile of money available both for study and for actual physical projects. And this is that thing that requires, there's some layers of preservation restriction required. If you're getting money for study, it needs a PR for 2 years. If you actually get money for the physical project itself, it's in perpetuity. So it's an interesting option, one thing that I'll bring to the town. But I think that there are videos that are available on the Mass Historical Commission website to sort of educate everybody on this, and I would encourage you to take a look at those if you get a chance. Also, there's some upcoming MHC workshops, and in particular, the Eastern Mass Historical what is that? Conservation Coalition is doing something on the demolition delay bylaw. Did you guys get that email? I wasn't clear if you'd received it all or not. On February 6th at 10 a.m. About implementation of the demo delay bylaw. And this, of course, this is real high on my list 2024 to get this rewritten, as we need to revise it and bring it back to town meeting. And again, I've been holding in the hope that we get a good result in the Doc Stone House, which I think would be sort of a model case for why the town needs a DDBL. But I'll send you guys this information. They're going to record it. So if you can't make 10 a.m. on Tuesday, February 6th, you can watch a recording of it. But I think it's going to be worthwhile for everybody to have a really good understanding of this as we move deeper into 2024.
They've always had, that's a new organization, a new coalition. They've only had a couple events so far, but they've all been interesting. I've been able to attend or watch, I think, all of them that they've had. They do one every couple of months or every few months. So it's
yeah, I remember the last one that you said you had watched and were really enthused about it. So, but I'll forward that information. Anyway, that's all I've got. Is there any public comment? Going once, going twice. Sold, and thank you. So, is there a motion to adjourn? Made by Dan, seconded by Michelle. Is that fair? Just nod if that was correct. Dan makes the motion, Michelle seconds. Good. Roll call vote. Annie?
Yes.
Grant?
Yes.
Michelle?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
Miller is aye. Thank you so much. This was a good one. I thought we got a lot done.
Yeah.
Thank you all. I will keep you posted. If you got any questions, let me know, and let's move forward.
Thank you.
Good night,
Thanks,
everybody.
everyone.
Bye.
All right. Good
Night.
night, everybody.
Bye.